Welcome, everybody, to the Soul of the Unexplained. I am your host, Jim. That's right, Jim with two M's. That's right, count them, one, two M's. Why? Well, my mama dropped me on my head a couple of times, and that might explain quite a few things, like particularly the whole bit with me being a Raiders fan and being from New York. Don't ask me how that happened, but it did happen, and I am, in fact, still here as your wonderful host here for the Soul of the Unexplained. Normally, folks, my great co-host and co-creator of the Soul of the Unexplained, Mr. Roger Stokes, would be joining me, but unfortunately, Roger's feeling under the weather today, so he's not going to be able to join us. And so I just want to do a quick tip of the hat to my brother from another mother, Mr. Roger Stokes, and wish him a speedy recovery for his current ailment, and can't wait to get back at it. This great topic of the unexplained with Roger as my co-host. But folks, I am really excited to welcome a guest who has been on the Soul of the Unexplained before. In fact, this is your third time coming to the Soul of the Unexplained. So, folks, please allow me to welcome my very dear friend and my favorite Denver Broncos fan, Mr. John Neiberger. John, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. I thank you for inviting me on. I have a blast every time, so this is great. And you're right, it is pretty weird to be a New Yorker that's a Raiders fan. I still think that's just weird, but but
It's
no, I
all
really
because all
appreciate.
because of my mother. My mother was the Raiders fan, and we're talking. We'll do a little detour here and talk about NFL football. But my back in the mid to late 1970s is when I really started watching football and taking interest in it. And at the time, all of my schoolmates were either Dallas Cowboy fans because that was the era of Roger Staubach and
Mm,
Danny White and all that. And if they weren't Cowboys fans, they were Steelers fans. So of course that was the era of Terry Bradshaw, Franco Harris, the Steel Curtain, right? Well, my mother, for whatever reason, was a Raiders fan, and so by osmosis, through my mother, I became a fan of the Raiders, which is not easy being a Raiders fan anywhere, I must say, but try growing up in upstate New York where the bulk of people are Giants or Steelers or Jets fans, and of course Buffalo Bills fans. But when I was growing up, the Bills, Jim Kelly hadn't arrived at that time, so the Bills were kind of like an afterthought. And I just, to this day, I do not like the Giants or the Jets. In fact, neither the Jets or the Giants even play in New York, right? I mean, they play in New
right,
Jersey, and
right.
let's face it, New York is what New Jersey wants to be when it grows up, right?
Yep.
I didn't say that, but but anyhow, so yeah, I'm a Raiders fan, lifelong Raiders fan, and
And
it's
now
not
you're in AFC West territory.
that's right, AFC West. And now at least I live west of the Mississippi, living in Utah, where I do have to say most of the folks that live in Utah are either Broncos fans or Packers fans, Packers and Steelers. It's like the
That's
Steelers
weird.
and Packers fans are all over the country, but
I don't get that one.
there is a fair amount of Raiders fans in Utah though, so it's not quite as hostile territory being a Raiders fan in Utah as it was in New York. But anyhow, both of our teams have had their ups and downs, right? And it's you know
Yeah.
just goes to show that we can still be friends despite our differences with our football teams.
We have shared grief. We're both gonna suffering a lot of grief this season, I think. So
That's
yeah.
right. I think we're going to have some shared trauma this
Yes.
coming football season for sure.
Yep.
Anyhow, folks, we are not here to talk about NFL football, and we are in fact here to talk about three things specifically for this particular episode. We're of course going to do a recap of the Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, season 5, episode 5, which has been titled "The Flash." And then after we do our recap and summary of episode 5 of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, John and I are going to talk about the some of the big news announcements that came out this past week. Specifically, the announcement of Lue Elizondo's book. We now have a title for it and a publishing date, which we'll discuss. And also John, the big bombshell remarks that were made by Colonel Karl Nell this past week at the SALT conference regarding his views on non-human intelligence, and cannot wait to dive into that with you after we discuss episode 5. So before we dive into episode 5, John, let's just a quick overview. What are your thoughts as you were watching this latest episode of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, which called The Flash?
Man,
What are kind of your overall views?
The Flash is kind of like how fast that episode went by.
Right?
But my first thought, well, you know, 100 times during the episode, I was like, what in the world? But by the end, I was like, there's too much that happened in this episode to even remember. Like, I'm glad you asked me on. I had to rewatch it again, but I was planning on doing it anyway because so much happened that it's mind blowing how much stuff. In the first season, they were just starting to discover some strange things, and it wasn't always repeatable. And as they've progressed through the seasons, they've started to develop ways to get a little bit to poke that hornet's nest and get a repeatable response of some variety. And that's kind of what I thought this episode was. We've reached the point where it seems like every time they go out to do something, something happens. The ranch responds some way, even though it's a different way. And it just was blowing my mind. It's mind blowing.
Yeah,
I don't know what else to say initially.
I completely agree. In fact, it's funny that you mentioned, how much there is to cover, because Roger and I had initially planned to do these season 5 episode recaps in 5 minutes or less. And when I told Jeff Freeman of the J Free 906 podcast of my desire to want to do something like that, he's like, "Good luck, guys. There's so much in these episodes. If you think you can nail it in 5 minutes or less," he's like, "Hats off to you, but good luck. Have fun storming the castle."
Yeah,
And
not gonna
and
happen.
you know what? The very first one we did for the first episode, we did it in just a little bit over 5 minutes, and then of course the second and third episodes we completely derailed and went way beyond 5 minutes in our recap. And then last week Roger was able to do a recap in around 10 minutes, but
Hmm?
this one, this one's going to take a little longer than 5 minutes, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Right on. Well, also, I have to do a quick shout out to my very dear friend Linda Simpson, who of course is the moderator for the J Free 906 podcast. And for my birthday, which was fairly recently, Linda and Jan Scorza and the wonderful folks that do Jeff's tumblers, and forgive me, it's the name is escaping me for some reason, but such an amazing and beautiful job on this great mug that they made for me that is Skinwalker Ranch themed. And I don't know how well any of this is going to show up on the video screen here, but they made me this great mug that has one of the quotes that we always hear from Travis. What in the crap? Uh, it's on here, and Homestead 2, and there's an alien. There's a UFO beaming up. I'm guessing that's probably going to be Dragon. And then it says, kick the hornet's nest and
Yep.
high strangeness. And so this is an awesome, wonderful birthday present that Linda and Jan whipped up for me. So cheers to Linda and Jan for the awesome present. And I am going to enjoy a swig of ice cold grape crush right now.
That's ridiculously cool. It shows up well. That's awesome.
Awesome. Cool. Alrighty. So let me put on my 4 eyes here as we dive into episode 5 of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. And so the episode starts out with Eric and Travis and Thomas and Dragon meeting in the command center. And Travis recounts the strange experience of Eric Bard and Brady Davis developing a metallic taste in their mouths while drilling at the triangle. And of course, that happened in episode 4. Travis then tells Eric how he and Thomas took a voltmeter over to the drill to get readings of possible electrical anomalies. And he proceeds to tell Eric how they placed one lead of the voltmeter on the drill bit and the other lead into the ground, and how they should have detected absolutely nothing. However, because it's Skinwalker Ranch, they did detect something. And so, what it was, John, is they actually measured an electrical field between the ground and the drill bit. And now, in all fairness, it wasn't a large or considerable voltage reading, but it still was something that would be considered anomalous. And Travis mentions that the voltage reading very well could have been higher while the drilling was going on, but unfortunately, the drill they weren't running the voltmeter test while drilling was actually in process. So I don't know about you, John, but what this reminded me of right off the bat was that episode from, I want to say it was season two, where they had the huge Tesla coils,
Hmm.
and they got the Tesla coils going out on the ranch, and then they stuck those fluorescent light bulbs in the ground, and there was enough electricity conducting to light those light bulbs that were simply stuck in the ground. I mean, that ground, that area there is undeniably seems to have some kind of a conducive quality to it, as far as electrical signals, electrical impulses, and um, I myself, I don't come from a background of electrical engineering, and I don't know what kind of background you might have in it, John, but um, that seems rather noteworthy. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
No, I agree. I'm the same way. I'm not a geologist or electrical engineer. I don't know what sorts of voltage potentials would naturally exist in different scenarios. I don't have any idea, but it did seem kind of strange. And it just now occurred to me. I wonder if there's a way that next time they drill, if you could have that set up so it's measuring that voltage all the time, you have one side, connected to ground and one side connected to the drilling rig somehow, and then just check. I don't know if that would even work, but it might be kind of an interesting thing because, like you said, when it initially happened and they were tasting metal, maybe the voltage was higher than when Travis was checking it later. So that would be kind of interesting. I don't know if that's feasible or not, but yeah, it does seem kind of strange, that would be there. Half a volt maybe doesn't seem like a lot, but yeah, I don't know. It did seem a little odd that it was there in the first place. I wouldn't have expected that. But again, I'm not an expert on that.
No, I agree. It does. It seems it's definitely something I think that's worth keeping in consideration for any future type things that might occur there. So Eric then shows Travis, Thomas, and Dragon the GPS readings from a GPS device that was affixed to the drilling rig while it was operating. And no surprise, the GPS data once again shows extreme anomalous readings, this time indicating that the drilling rig was drilling directly into the mesa and not directly into the ground in the triangle. And so the GPS data showed kind of a northwest um, track that led into the mesa underground instead of showing the rig drilling straight down into the ground. Eric then showed a graphic where the GPR results taken by Lunasonde last season were overlaid on top of the new GPS data from the drilling rig, and there were some striking similarities. Perhaps too much so, I would say, to be a coincidence. And remember, Lunasonde was a radar survey that was done via balloon. They sent the balloons up, and that survey seemed to show the possible existence of underground voids or tunnels or passageways that run from the triangle to the mesa, into the mesa, I might add. And these radar survey results also mentioned that these tunnels or passageways indicated a high level of metals. Eric then says, quote, it's almost as if we've got something, whether it's natural or not, that we've got something under the surface that is influencing the data that we've collected in several different ways. Completely different technologies, and they're lining up. And Eric, Travis, and Thomas then verbally and enthusiastically agree that they need to continue drilling at the triangle. And Dragon, of course, they just panned to him with his expression of, Did he? Okay.
That was the best. Like, you gotta be kidding me.
Right. So John, let's kind of just touch upon that. The fact that Lunason's data seem to indicate the presence of these underground voids. You know, you call them what you will. Call them voids,
Mhm.
call them tunnels, call them passageways that seem to run from the mesa down through the triangle. And as we know, there's been all kinds of stories and legends of there being underground facilities, underground bases. Uh, it's anybody's guess if such a thing were to exist, whether it would be some kind of top secret government, unacknowledged special access program kind of thing, or if, someone else constructed it, however long ago. So what were kind of your thoughts as they were showing the overlay comparison between what the drilling GPS data showed, how it kind of went into the mesa, even though it was going straight down into the ground, and then how it kind of appeared to kind of mirror very closely the results that we got from Lunason. What are your
The-
thoughts on that?
that is actually the part that was strangest to me. I mean, you touched on it. These are different technologies. One was radar, a ground penetrating radar to see what was, it was a radar survey of what's underneath that area. The other is GPS data. And the fact that they both, the radar showed one sort of set of structures, maybe metallic sort of tubes or something like that. And then right above that, you have these GPS anomalies. But the weird thing about the GPS anomalies is it took something that should have been vertical. They were drilling vertically.
Straight down.
So you should have just seen a straight vertical line, generally straight. And instead it had been flipped horizontally, like they were drilling into the mesa.
Right.
That is crazy bizarre. And another thing that just now occurred to me is I know there's been a lot of talk about what could be happening above the triangle that influences GPS signals, maybe something to do with time or space extending or contracting, time or space or something that's throwing off the timing of the GPS signals. That could that kind of makes me wonder, how does I have to think about this some more now. I just realized I truly don't know the answer to this question. Like, I don't know what GPS data they were collecting because they were drilling, right? They were
Right. They're
so
drilling.
I actually need to think about this a little bit more. But it seems like if the drill bit is underground,
Mhm.
it seems like the GPS signals would not penetrate the ground, right?
Right.
That's what I would have thought. So now I guess I need to think about that some more. But my point overall was it seems like what should have been a vertical, survey of GPS data was horizontal, as if it were going into the mesa, headed right towards the other anomalies that I'm sure we're about to talk about,
Yep.
which they, Jan also picked up on previously. So
Yeah.
I have more to
Well,
say on that, but let's talk about Jan before.
yeah, we're gonna get to that rabbit hole fairly soon. So
Yeah.
so stay tuned, folks. So Eric then tells the guys that he has some footage to show them from a high-speed camera that was pointed at the sky above the triangle while they were running that recent drilling operation at the triangle. So Eric shows them the footage in an enhanced mode, and what that means is it kind of applies a filter that makes it easier to see items or objects or phenomena that are in the sky. And it he explains that there's the one of the things that you're seeing is the presence of a lens flare. But then he says that there are other items in the footage that he cannot readily dismiss as something that is prosaic or mundane. And he shows several UAPs that are caught on this high speed camera footage, quote unquote, traveling in unison and looking almost like what I would describe, being a New Yorker, as a UAP Grand Central Station, right? And I don't know about you, John, but I counted somewhere between 11 and 12 different UAPs flying around in that footage that were coming into the frame. And Travis says that these objects are flying faster than airplanes, and Eric says, quote, "That's not natural." To which Travis concurs and says, "This is the most UAPs caught on film at one time during his time investigating there at the ranch." And I don't know about you, John, but that right there, that one statement from Travis saying that this is the most UAPs caught on film at one time during the entire, 5 years now that he has been uh, part of the team investigating at Skinwalker Ranch. I mean, that's not an insignificant thing to make note of.
Nope.
And like I said, I wouldn't trust my math skills because not only am I a Raiders fan, but I'm just math said bye bye to me a long time ago. But I counted what seemed to be about 11 or 12 different UAPs that were flying into that frame, and as Travis said, there were a couple of them that were flying at what seemed to be a really high velocity.
Mhm.
Um, I'd seen nothing like it. How about you?
No, I haven't either. Honestly, my first impression when I saw it was we were watching gnats flying around close to the camera. That was my first thought before he pointed them out. I'm like, oh, there's gnats flying around or something, because it didn't look like flies because they
Right,
were points, you
right,
know, and you couldn't see wings or anything. So I'm like, what in the world is that? But then, yeah, they proliferated, and then suddenly now there's more of them, and this is one of those cases where I wish we saw more of the recording than what they're able to squeeze onto the TV show, because
right.
I'm sure there was more discussion where they eliminated things up close to the camera and all the prosaic normal explanations. They probably covered all of that, and none of it made it to the TV screen. But yeah, I was amazed once you see this stuff. Like, okay, I don't see any wings, I don't see anything flapping. These aren't birds. The way they're flying is like they're clearly not birds. And if they're not flies, and maybe not some other flying critter close to the lens, then it's something really bizarre. And they look just like points. I mean, I wish we had seen the unembossed version too.
Yeah.
That would have been nice, because I was curious what that would look like in the unenhanced version. Like, what did it look like visually? But
My,
yeah,
my
the embossing does help it pop out to make it a little bit easier. It
yeah,
just gives you a little more contrast.
right.
Otherwise, it's something very light gray on a lighter gray sky, or
Mhm.
it's harder to see. But yeah, I
And
was fascinated.
the other thing that I always have to remind myself is that these things are flying at such a velocity they're not seen by the naked eye,
Hmm.
right? I mean, how many times have we already heard that, Caleb or some of the other guys were standing right there in the field while they're conducting these experiments, and these things are literally flying right over their head, and there's no sound. They don't
Hmm.
see it. The only way that they're able to see it is because of those high-speed cameras that capture the images on film, because they're that shutter is several hundred times a second that it's
Hmm.
able to pick up. So that
Yep.
tells you how fast these things are moving. These things are as fast as or faster than the proverbial speeding bullet, right?
Hmm.
So
Well, they caught it on a previous episode when Jan had the GPR in the other part of the field and saw the anomaly above them.
right,
And then they also caught on the camera, like, what, 3 or 4 frames of something flying over them. That shows you how fast whatever that was traversed that part of the sky right above their heads in 4 frames,
yeah,
5 frames.
hmm
That's moving.
yeah,
That is
that's
seriously moving.
that's booking pretty quick.
Yeah.
Yep. So then the team agrees to promptly resume drilling in the triangle to further verify if there's a correlation between the drilling activity and the appearance of UAPs. So, John, this brings us to Jan Franke Part 2. Part 2.
Hmm.
So, Caleb and Jan go out to the Mesa to scan the area with a new GPR device. And it'll be in areas where Jan previously detected evidence of something very strange buried deep inside the mesa. So the two of them, Caleb and Jan, climb to the top of the mesa, and Jan begins a grid-like kind of a push broom pattern across the top of the mesa, back and forth like that, in the area where the strange readings had occurred. And this would be, in regards to the object, this would be in regards to that 400-foot long dome shaped object that was detected inside the mesa previously. And Travis reminds us that the drilling done during season 3 of the series, when they drilled horizontally into the mesa and were unable to penetrate the object, nevertheless, they were able to gather, remember, metallic fragments from the object that were later determined by the University of Utah to contain tellurium and europium, which were fused together by some process in a way that is similar to the way that heat shielding tiles are fabricated to protect spacecraft from the heat of re-entry into Earth's atmosphere. And Caleb and Jan then begin their scan of the mesa. And so, what I wanted to ask you about this, John, is number one, how cool is it to see them bringing Jan back? And folks, let's not forget that Jan is one of the world's foremost authorities on ground penetrating radar. So this isn't just some guy that's off there for a weekend, and Monday through Friday he has a job working as a electrical engineer or something like that. This is a guy who his thing is ground penetrating radar, and he is regarded as one of the world's foremost authorities on that particular technology. So,
Yep.
how cool is it to have him back with new technology to kind of hopefully get some new data and new insights, if you will, into what this massive anomaly, this you know previously reported dome-shaped anomaly that is inside the mesa, what it might be. What was that like for you?
Oh man, first of all, I love Jan. I think he's great. I hope they have him on every season. He's
Right.
just, I was so happy to
He's
see
like
him back.
Pete Kelsey. He's
Yeah,
kind of like part of the team now, right?
exactly. He was so great. But he endeared himself to me when he first was on the show. I think it was last season, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
He turns his stuff on and it's
He's
acting
like,
completely
wait a minute.
inappropriately. He's looking at me like, you guys pulling my leg. Are you serious?
Right.
But no, this season I thought it was great to see him on there. And when he showed them the results of the radar data and the resulting kind of shape, the general outline of the structure, and then Travis saying it looked like a debris field, you know, give me a break. Okay, so let me preface this by saying I don't necessarily believe in things. Yeah, I hold certain things very tentatively based on what information I have available, right? But look at where this is going. You've got the GPR data showing metallic tubes and other pieces of strange things, and then the metallurgy data that they sent to the University of Utah from the scrapings that they got out of the drilling hole. And then you've got two different tests up on the mesa showing, hey, there's something in here and it's really big and we don't know what in the hell this is. We all know the rumors, right? Or the supposition. I'm starting to think this might actually be the case, that maybe millions of years ago, when that was like Lake Uinta or whatever, I can't remember what it actually was called, but it was
Bonneville, Lake Bonneville, I think.
that what it was? Like one,
Yeah.
yeah, it was just a giant lake, a little mini ocean. What if a UFO freaking crashed there and stuck in the soft ground, and then I don't know, maybe the engine is still running. I don't know. I don't know what's causing it. But and then over time, the land hardened and the waters receded, and millions of years have gone by, and that thing is still in there acting weird. I don't know. I have no explanation for it, but it sure is tantalizing to think about. And it would make a little sense if there's something truly alien that we just can't comprehend, some technology that's so far beyond us that we don't even understand what it's doing to our environment, at the ranch. Maybe all of the stuff that's been happening is just side effects of this technology. The engine is in there idling and occasionally acts up or something, and it backfires and a UAP appears, or
Yeah.
who knows what. I don't know. It's strange, but I swear to God, I'm starting to think that might be what happened.
Well, there's definitely a very strong element of stay tuned for that.
Yep. Yep.
So we kind of, as Jan and Caleb are going to set up their scanning experiment, the uh, the program then cuts to Tom Lewis and Candace Lindy welcoming back onto the ranch a neighbor of Skinwalker Ranch by the name of Adelita Diaz, or Addie as she's known. And those of you that are longtime watchers of the docuseries The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch will recognize her. I believe she appeared in, it was either I think it was season 3 of the show, and she came on previously to discuss some of the legends of the area. And she returns with her brother Bubba Diaz to discuss some of the cattle mutilations and their experiences with Bob Bigelow's team. And Travis then discusses how biologist Ben Woodruff recently showed them evidence that a long extinct predator canine known as a direwolf, or perhaps some heretofore unknown genetic species or descendant of a direwolf, may have had a hand in killing a cow on Skinwalker Ranch back in October of 2022. And again, John, legends of dire wolves go back to not only the Sherman family, but even former Skinwalker Ranch security officer Chris Bartell, who
Mhm.
Roger and I have had on this program before. And Roger and I just think the world of Chris Bartell. Even he had an encounter with an extremely large canine or wolf like creature during his time working on Skinwalker Ranch during the Bigelow era. And so Addie Diaz tells a story of how her grandfather, who in 1997 lived near the Skinwalker Ranch property, and he found one of his cattle along the Skinwalker Ranch fence line, the property fence line. And this particular cow had no nose, no tongue, no eyes, and its ears were cut off. Everything inside the cow was gone, and there was not a drop of blood around it. And another kind of creepy thing that Addie says is that this cow's liver had been quote unquote perfectly placed on a log next to it. And there were also no tracks of any predator animals near the carcass. And so Addie then says that a team had come out to take a look at the cow. First it was a local veterinarian, and then we would assume the Bigelow NIDS team came and took a look at it. And as Addie is talking about that, Bubba interrupts and quickly says, he points out that there is a massive plane flying really low to the ground, flying over the Skinwalker Ranch property. And it turns out that it is a C-17 cargo plane, again, flying along the perimeter of the ranch at a very low altitude. And I don't know what it looked like to you, John, but it looked to me like it was maybe just a couple hundred feet off the ground. I mean,
It's pretty
uh,
low. Yeah,
really,
it looked pretty low to me. Yeah.
really low. And folks, there are no airports, there is no landing strip nearby that a plane, particularly of this size, would be able to land at. The nearest airport would be either, I think, maybe Roosevelt or Vernal. And if you go the other direction, if you go west, your closest airport is probably Heber City, which is, several hours, road trip away anyway.
If you
So
go east, there's Rangeley, and you're definitely not landing. No one's landing C-17s at Rangeley Airport.
exactly, and I don't see how anybody's going to land a C-17 in Vernal, Roosevelt, or even Heber City. So, I mean, this is a big cargo plane, folks.
Mhm.
And so Eric then confirms the presence of this C-17 on several of the ranch cameras. Travis then asks, and he says, "quote So was this a military plane trying to spy on us just as we're looking deeper into what could be inside the mesa? And if so, for what purpose?" Close quote. And so Tom Lewis then asks Bubba, he says, if he's ever, whether or not he's ever seen military planes or helicopters flying so low in the area before. And Bubba says that he has seen them all over the Uinta Basin doing just that. And Bubba mentions that some of the aircraft have that camera or that big sensor dome located on the bottom of the aircraft. Um,
Hmm.
and that he has also seen what is presumably an AWACS plane flying in the basin as well. And of course, AWACS is kind of like the big surveillance plane that the United States began using in the Cold War in the end of the 70s, beginning of the 80s. That has kind of like that satellite dish on top of
Mhm.
the fuselage. And so Candace then asked Addie if she or Bubba ever saw or experienced any weird things while Bigelow's team was on the ranch. And they mentioned having seen Humvees and other military trucks coming and going from the Skinwalker Ranch property, and flatbed trailers carrying covered objects away from the ranch. And then Tom mentions how Bigelow still hasn't shared the results of his investigations into the ranch. Although, this is interesting to note, Bigelow has come out in recent years and has gone on the record affirming his complete belief in the existence of extraterrestrials and in those extraterrestrials visiting and or maintaining a presence here on Earth. So, John, a lot to unpack in that little segment right there.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah, just a tiny bit. So
Yeah.
let's start off with the whole bit of cattle mutilations. Now, this with this cow that they've been talking about that died in October of 2022, we don't really. I don't know if that's something we can necessarily call something as a mutilation because the cow was still intact, right? I mean, there was no. It wasn't one of those classic cases where the carcass was spread out and you know the eyes and the tongue and the ears, everything had been cut out of it with surgical precision. There was none of that with this particular case of the cow that passed away recently on Skinwalker Ranch. Instead, it was more what made it really particularly noteworthy is the fact that we have a credible biologist who has said all of your typical predator animals that would have had the ability to take this thing down, there's no signs, and furthermore, there's no signs of it having been shot. And the reason why they say there's no signs of it having been shot is quite obviously there's no blood. And
Hmm.
and also with any predator animal, if there's a kill, there's going to be plenty of blood. I mean, think of how many quarts or pints of blood or gallons of blood that
Yeah.
a full grown cow
It's a
is going
lot.
to have
Yeah.
coursing through its system. Yet there was no signs of any kind of known predator attack. There was certainly, any kind of firearm. Caleb is a working active law enforcement officer. He's trained in ballistics and things like that. And Caleb has said, there's no sign that we have reason to think that this cow was shot. And I myself believe the same thing. I having hunted when I was a kid and seeing what a firearm, several different calibers of a firearm will do to an animal, it did not look like it had been shot. It's too that bullet. If you're saying that that's a bullet hole that was in that rib bone, that's too clean. And
Mhm.
bullets don't work quite that clean way when they go through a bone like that.
Mhm.
So we have this biologist Ben Woodruff who did his due diligence and took all of the known predator animals in Utah that would have been capable of taking down a prey the size of this cow. And that's a pretty short list because you're basically left with mountain lion, black bear, um, and they have feral dogs that are out in that area. They call them res dogs, and those are really the only ones that if you're looking at like a pack of dogs. But again, assuming it was a feral dog attack, they're usually roaming around in packs, just like wolves,
Hmm.
and there would be evidence of struggle. There would be plenty of blood. There would be it'd be a gruesome crime scene. That cow would not be that intact, right?
Hmm.
Would be one of the things that I would present as evidence for that. Um, Coyotes just simply too small. Fox too small. Um,
Yeah,
so
fox
you're
is not going to go after a cow.
and right. And as far as wolves go, there are I have yet to run into a person that works for the Utah Department of Wildlife or Department of Natural Resources that says, yes, we have an active population of gray wolves or timber wolves, whatever you want to call them, that have been uh, documented to exist in that part of Utah. Is it impossible? I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's not likely. It's not likely at all that it's wolves. Excuse me. Um, so Ben, doing his due diligence and doing all this research, came to the determination that one of the things that it might be that seems to fit the bite pattern, and that would have conceivably had the power due to the shape of the way that its jaw is and the musculature that it had to take down a big prey, would have been a long extinct creature known as a dire wolf, a species that, as far as we know, died out at least 10,000 years ago. And so, again, that kind of brings us to the whole bit, like you were talking a moment ago, John, where this speculation, where if you're anything like me, a lot of the things like the dire wolf and the whole alien connection was kind of like more on the fringe of possibility and speculation. But now we have data that's pushing us in that direction that says, well, maybe not so fast. Maybe we need to take a closer look at this. We don't know how. And in fact, Ben specifically even said he's not claiming that this is a pack of, extinct dire wolves that have set up, that have lived undetected in this ranch for however many thousands of years. He's just saying that it's one possibility. It could be an undocumented, previously unknown species that may exist there that is a descendant of some kind of a dire wolf, or something else that we just simply don't know of. Now, again, there's all kinds of speculation as to how that might be possible. There's people that have said, well, if there really is proof of portals opening up that could conceivably link to another time and place, is it possible that, one of these wormholes or portals opens up, however they do, whenever they do? And let's say that a dire wolf back in, 12,000 years ago was just kind of trotting along, minding his own business in, whatever year that is back then. And all of a sudden, bam, he finds himself, and here he is in 2022, or in the Sherman's case, 1994, and then all of a sudden, they disappeared just as quickly as they showed up, which is what seems to have happened according to the Sherman case, and uh, even in Chris Bartell's case. He actually saw this thing briefly, and when they went to when the ranch dogs chased after it, and Chris Bartell and his security partner gave pursuit to this, same thing. The tracks went around this corner where there was a bend in the road, and then all of a sudden, it's gone. The tracks just disappear, and like the thing disappeared into thin air. So clearly there is a history. There is a fairly recent history of truly bizarre phenomena occurring where there appears to be some kind of large unknown predator animal that may have been responsible for causing at least some of these the death of some of these cattle. Now, I have to be honest, John, I don't think that let's say for a moment that it is either a dire wolf or it is some unknown descendant of the dire wolf that has some of its same characteristics. I don't think that that's necessarily, if that is proven to be correct and accurate and to actually have existed or to be the case here, I don't think that still answers the cattle mutilation, because a predator animal would not be causing these precise incisions that would be, removing the tongue. That would be, because, I mean, when an animal eats, it's, you
Yeah,
know,
it's going to be messy and bloody and
right.
not precision cuts at all, like you see with cattle mutilations. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
So, again, what's behind these cattle mutilations?
Well, and you said that on the one that they were talking about in the show, they said the cow was here and its liver was like on a log or a rock or something next to it, intact.
Mhm.
That's really strange. I mean, normally
Yeah.
they see stuff that's just gone, but in this case, it was there. I'm like, did the aliens take it? And then one of the other aliens said, "Put that back. I don't like liver."
Well,
What?
can
What
you
is
blame
that?
them? Have
What is
have
up
you
with that?
ever had liver and
I hate
onions?
liver, so I do not
It's
blame them
not
at all.
good.
It's disgusting. Maybe they needed to get some onions, before they went. But it's
There you
just
go.
the type of thing is inexplicable to me.
Yeah.
Nothing about your stereotypical cattle mutilation makes any sense. But it's real quick about the direwolf idea. I don't know, and this will get back to the Skinwalker Ranch Insiders program. I don't know if you saw my post the other day that had a print. Did you see that one? A footprint?
I haven't,
So,
no.
okay, so my hometown, for people watching, my hometown is about 50 miles east of the ranch. And someone on my hometown's Facebook page posted something that said, "Hey, look, I just ran across this photo of a footprint I took a few years ago on Rabbit Mountain, which is it's also a little further southeast of the ranch, but it's about 50 miles away.
Mhm.
And it looked just like the photos that Chris Bartell took when he saw that thing years ago. You look at them and they look the same. And this guy, when he took it, he set his 4-inch pocket knife next to it, and that print from top to bottom was just over 4 inches. So it's a big paw.
Yeah.
It's a pretty big paw, and that's only 50 miles away. And I thought that's pretty weird. Like is that just maybe a little bit of confirmation that there's something in that area
Yeah.
that maybe we don't see very often, but once in a while you'll see some signs of it. Because it was a weird looking print. I mean, it looks more like a dog than a wolf, but it's huge.
Right.
It's just enormous.
Well, and let's also not forget, in regards to creatures that should no longer exist. I mean, there's obviously the well-known case of the coelacanth, right? A fish that was supposedly went extinct however many millions of years ago, and then all of a sudden it's discovered off the coast of Madagascar back at the beginning of the 20th century. That was supposed to, have been extinct for eons. And then there's the case of the giant squid, right? We were told for years that these stories of there being monstrously large squid were, just the product of drunken sailors and, designed to, make fairy tales about uh, being out at sea, and encountering strange creatures. Well, turns out, and this is fairly recent, I mean, what, like not even 20 years ago, they were able to get verifiable proof that giant squid do exist, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so again, whether you want to fold this into the classic Sasquatch argument or this case with the dire wolf that we're deliberating regarding Skinwalker Ranch, is that it's never out of the realm of possibility that some of these things could exist, right? We just simply haven't arrived at a point where we have conclusive, irrefutable proof.
Mm-hmm.
But I do feel that one way or the other, that proof is coming.
Well,
Um,
they have that carcass, right?
right,
Do the DNA test.
right.
They have the DNA. Do the test. That'll tell you. I mean, if I remember right, the dire wolf is more closely related to like a jackal than a
Right.
wolf.
than a
So
wolf. Yeah.
if you run that DNA test and you're like, yeah, this looks pretty close to a jackal, actually, give me a break. What does that tell you?
Right.
And jackals in Northeast Utah.
And the thing that blows my mind is, again, go back to Chris Bartell's account. He estimated that this thing, and Chris, forgive me if I get this wrong, but I think he said that what he saw was about the size of a donkey. I mean, that's bigger than any wolf. I mean, that's you're talking a small horse essentially.
And it's not a
So
jackal
yeah,
either.
yeah. So it's either a monstrously sized dog, a modern day canine of some kind, or it really is something truly extraordinary, undocumented that clearly, both by Chris Bartell's account, the Sherman's account, what we're seeing now on the ranch, and what you just mentioned with the photograph that was taken in that same general geographic region. I mean, let's face it, 50 miles is well within the range of any wild animal,
Exactly.
right? So um, that's a door that I'm keeping open for possibility. I'm not going to say definitively that I think it's a dire wolf, but certainly something that is not what we would consider to be a regular predator animal that is known to exist in the state of Utah or within that region of western Colorado, eastern Utah.
Mhm.
So just
Yep, I agree. More investigation required.
exactly. More things to make you go, right?
Hmm.
So from there, um, again, they mentioned about how the let's talk for a quick moment about that plane, John. We've seen in the past, right here on Skinwalker Ranch, how the military uh, appears to have an interest, if for no other reason than flying over and for bizarre tourism, right? Like guys are out on an exercise on a Chinook helicopter, and the pilot says, "Hey, let's swing over and see what the Skinwalker Ranch guys are doing." Could be something as simple and innocuous as that, or it could be something a little more concerning and possibly nefarious. Where, in the instance of when the Blob episode happened last season, within roughly 7 to 10 minutes of when they saw that thing in the sky above the triangle, this military Black Hawk helicopter flies over, and what are the odds? I don't think that was a coincidence.
Yeah,
Um,
it's pretty unusual, I would say.
yeah, and too much. There just there seems to me to be some kind of surveillance going on by an outside entity, and whether that's our own government, or let's be honest, it could very well be some foreign adversary that's trying to see what they can find out about Skinwalker Ranch, because it's obviously a point of interest, and the potential technological and other implications that would be involved if any of this mystery is ever figured out. You can easily see why foreign adversaries in particular would want to have a leg up and be savvy to what is going on there at the ranch. So what are your thoughts? I mean, we've also seen from the season previews, it looks like there's at least another incident that's going to be coming up where we see another one of those large planes flying by,
Mhm.
cargo type plane. What are your thoughts on that?
I think with this is my gut feeling is that this is a mix of all of the above. You know, like the Chinooks that had the weird symbol on the side. I think someone found a photo of one of them being used to help install some high power, like electric, power distribution lines over by Roosevelt. So they might have just been, hey, let's go take a look. So that might just be a looky loo,
Right,
or so that might account for some of that stuff.
right.
And I think sometimes now that people know the show is filming during the summer and that there's going to be cameras pointed up, it wouldn't surprise me if there was another subset of groups that are like, if they just happen to be out and about, they're like, hey, let's swing by the ranch and see if we can get on the TV show, especially if you're a military flight. Maybe if they adjust their flight path just a little bit, maybe they'll get on the TV show and they'll be able to, hey, say hey to their friends. Yeah, that's us in the plane or whatever. But there's clearly some other stuff going on, like was it the anonymous group? They're the secret group that hired out the National Science Foundation plane, for example,
Yep.
and was doing a very clear surveillance pattern or some
Right.
sort of scanning pattern above the ranch. So you have that you have like the Black Hawk, which is clearly military.
Hmm.
Like there's no doubt there. The Chinook, the people we weren't sure, the C-17 is probably Air Force, but that Black Hawk, that was clearly a military helicopter, right? Um, so yeah, it makes you wonder, what are they doing there, especially at night? That was the weird thing about a daytime flight. Yeah, they're looky-loos, they're tourists, they're trying to get on the TV show. Showing up at night that's dangerous,
That's a
first of all.
risk, especially with the NOTAM having been filed. Because if
Exactly.
they're clearly they're going to have to be flying with night vision scope
Yep.
of some kind.
Yep.
And imagine the flash that is going to be created by a rocket going off if you're wearing night vision goggles, flying
Mhm.
as close to the ground as they were.
Yep.
That's a pretty big gamble to take with a multi-million-dollar aircraft.
It's dangerous. And I don't know. I mean, we know people who would know, but I don't remember what the requirements are if the military has to abide by NOTAMs. I would imagine that in that type of scenario that they do, because
Just
it's
be
not like we're
common
in a war
sense, yeah.
situation, not a combat situation. So
Mm.
I imagine that they should abide by them. So if they weren't abiding by the NOTAM and they're wearing night vision goggles, they're showing up at the ranch at night. Why? Why were they? Because that's pretty far out of your way from a military base. Why were they there in the first place? They didn't just launch from one of the bases out by closer to Salt Lake,
Yeah.
fly all the way to the ranch to get there at night and observe using night vision goggles, and then fly back. What were they doing there?
Mhm.
It's and I don't know how you get answers. I mean, clearly people have connections, but
Well, remember,
still
they had
have limits, right?
yeah, they had Utah's attorney general try to find out, and even he was told, don't go asking that question.
Hmm.
I mean, that's basically what he was told, is that's none of your business.
Yeah.
I mean, he's the highest ranking law enforcement official in the state of Utah, and they're basically telling him to go piss up a rope. And so that's got to tell you that there's certainly something shady going on, I would say.
It's weird. It's just weird.
Yeah,
It's not normal.
yeah, absolutely.
It needs an explanation, but yeah, I don't know if they'll ever get one.
Exactly. Could not agree more. So let's talk about Jan's results now. So the 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 scene then cuts to Travis, Eric, Caleb, Thomas, and Dragon gathered in the command center to meet with Jan via video conference to discuss the results of his GPR scan that he did across the mesa. And this is where things get really interesting, John. He says Jan tells them that he wanted to find out specifically how far back into the mesa that dome shaped anomaly went. And that's part of the reason for the scan. They did a total of 12 passes back and forth across the mesa, starting at the edge of the mesa and then gradually working their way back from the edge of it. And on his first pass, Jan got a hit in the same exact spot where the dome shaped object was detected previously. On his second pass, he got another hit in the same exact spot. So this process was repeated for the remaining of the 12 passes or scans that he did as he worked his way back from the edge of the mesa. Essentially, not only confirming the results of his previous scan, but giving greater detail on the shape or the layout of the anomaly. In other words, John, repeatable results.
Hmm.
How huge is that? So Jan then says that what this is most likely a very large metallic object buried inside the mesa, measuring at least 300 feet long. So we have confirmation now of a large metallic object buried inside the mesa. And Jan then shows them in a 3D model what the radar sees. He emphasizes, however, that this is not necessarily the actual shape of the object. And I thought that was interesting.
Mhm.
Travis then remarks that it looks like what a debris field would look like. There we are, getting back to your point
Yeah,
earlier.
I jumped the gun earlier.
Yeah,
I
that's okay.
was
And
so
Eric,
excited about
yeah, Eric then says, just think about what circumstances would produce a debris field inside of a mesa, right? So Jan then says, I can't see a natural phenomenon that we could easily explain causing this sort of anomaly. And Caleb then makes the remark that the whole situation reminds him of when they had demolitions expert Jake Huffman out to inspect the mesa in the same area a few years prior, where Jake told them, in his opinion, at some point there was likely blasting done to the mesa, perhaps to hide something. And Eric and Travis then mentioned that the mesa and what's buried inside it has become, quote unquote, the center point of their investigation. So, thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's super
Wow, right?
interesting. Yeah, I mean, give me a break. This goes back to I kind of jumped the gun earlier and jumped right to the results when we were talking about Jan because he's just so cool. But yeah, like what would explain this? It doesn't seem like just any sort of normal impact externally to dry ground even 100 or 200 years ago would create this. So that's what's making me think like if there's something buried there, it would had to have happened when the ground was soft, which was when it was a lake, Lake Bonneville. So maybe that's what this is. Maybe something did crash in there, and then everything else just formed around it. Who knows? Like I said, I don't necessarily believe one way or the other, but the evidence it's kind of pointing that direction, right? So I
Right.
don't know. It's bizarre. As far as uh the rock and the blasting, I don't know about that. It kind of does look like it. I'm not an expert, but I think I remember someone saying that they had found pictures of the ranch from before NIDS was there, and that those rocks already looked like that.
Right.
But I would have to go find. I don't know that at all for a fact. I remember someone saying that, but I cannot verify that. But that maybe would be something interesting to see if we could find some pre-Bigelow pictures of the ranch and just look and see if it's there. Surely someone has one.
My
Uh,
understanding is there was an aerial survey that was done back in, I want to say, the 1930s or the 1940s.
mhm.
And like you said, it shows pretty much the same thing. So, whatever, assuming that something deliberately collapsed that part of the mesa, it was done before the Shermans ever got there and possibly even before the Myers family
Yeah,
took possession of the property. So yeah, that's a good
yeah.
point.
But it's hard to say. But the way the geology of the region is too, things can break up in very blocky ways
Hmm.
that that are almost cubical, or rectangular, in unusual ways. But to some extent, that's the geology of the area. But who knows? At this point, it's kind of hard. I kind of want to avoid speculating, and because these guys know what they're doing, they're finding a lot of evidence quickly now. Like I said earlier, in the first season, they were slowly gathering some evidence. And in the second season, they were slowly picking up pace. But now it seems
Yeah,
like they kind of know where to focus. They know what
yeah,
generates responses. They kind of know what, in the electromagnetic spectrum, what frequencies they want to focus on for signaling. Um, it looks like they've got all of this stuff kind of down, and they have a very specific direction to head. So I am extremely excited to see where the rest of the season goes and then see where next season goes because the speed at which they are learning things is accelerating, and that's fascinating.
completely agree. I mean, it's for you touched on a couple things that I want to comment on. Number one, is you're absolutely correct, because I see the same thing. I see with this season in particular a greater focus on what they're doing, and like you said, it seems like it's all been building and building and building in regards to the approach and the just the direction that they're going. It's like they've already laid the groundwork, and now is the time in the investigation where they are really starting to dive in and focus on the truly extraordinary things. They know which experiments are going to have the likelihood of yielding the best results, and more importantly, repeatable results, which is what we've seen here with Jan. We are seeing, and not just with Jan, we're going to talk about this in just a moment when Callista Taylor, the
Hmm.
daughter of Travis Taylor, comes on. But we are seeing repeatable results on many aspects of the ranch, many aspects of this phenomena. Um, we're seeing repeatable results from different companies using different technologies, different sensor platforms, but still getting the same results. And as you know, as anybody that paid attention in their in grade school and in junior high and high school and beyond, is that the basic fundamental aspect of the scientific method is to be able to produce repeatable results.
Hmm.
And that's what naysayers regarding the ranch have said for years is, oh, there's no repeatable data. Well, again, they're not paying close enough attention, because they are getting repeatable results, and they are getting data that drives them into some of these areas that, like with the dire wolf. Again, that was not on my bingo card at the beginning of this
Yeah.
season. If there was one component to the Skinwalker Ranch mystery that I didn't really expect to get into to the extent that we have, it was the whole dire wolf thing. But again, why are we there? We're there because that's where the data seems to be driving us. And if you don't follow the data, then why, what kind of an investigation do you have? It's refreshing to me to see that Eric and Travis and everybody at the team, Jim Royston, Sam DeRiso, they're all driven by that data. They want to see those repeatable results, because that is what matters, and that's how we truly make progress in finding out what some of the answers to these mysteries might be. And like you, it just excites the heck out of me. I mean, I can't wait to see what's going to happen in the upcoming episodes this season, and you know what happens beyond. I think we're just going to see that pace continue to build, and that momentum to continue moving forward. So that brings us to Callista Taylor. Um, Travis Taylor has a daughter who is a sophomore student at the University of Alabama in Huntsville, which kind of makes me wonder, because Travis is an Auburn guy. He's War Eagle and University of Alabama. Come on, Travis, what the heck? Anyhow, I digress. See, got me talking about football again, John. We got to
It
stop
keeps
this.
coming around, doesn't it?
But Callista is an electrical engineering student at the University of Alabama in Huntsville, and so she comes with Travis to the ranch to conduct an experiment involving Omnitech's drones. And so Callista has built a sensor to track some of the things like GPS altitude and pressure, and it can also map the trajectory by the accelerometer data. And she built this really cool contraption that just looks really neat. And so Travis attaches Callista's sensor to one of Jim Royston's drones that will fly from the triangle where the drilling rig is to the east field, or over toward the East Canyon part of the Mesa, to monitor for any possible anomalies. So, as Sam DeRiso from Omnitech and Callista Taylor are monitoring the GPS mounted stuff on the drone, the anomaly happens in the same spot as it always does, at the area that I don't know about you, John, but I call it Kelsey's Spire.
I like
because that
that.
because
I
that's
haven't heard
where
that, but I like it.
that's where that bizarre Spire
Yeah.
lidar data came from Pete Kelsey 2 seasons ago. and it seems to happen in that same location. Again, John, another repeatable result.
Hmm.
So back to drilling, the drill rod then gets stuck in the hole that they're digging in the triangle, and they can't pull it back up, making it very difficult, if not impossible, for the team to drill any deeper in the same hole. So they decide to move the drill rig and start drilling in a different spot in the middle of the triangle area. And then, of course, because it is Skinwalker Ranch, the team decides to launch a rocket. You know, when in doubt, launch a rocket, right?
Right, right.
So then this brings us to the namesake of this particular episode, The Flash. You know, Flash, ah. Sorry for the Queen impression. Horrible. Won't do it again, promise.
Fantastic.
So within seconds of launching a rocket, the team sees a bright flash in the sky that they quickly determine was not an airplane or a satellite. It was pulsing bright in and out over and over and disappearing and reappearing in the same spot in the southwestern sky. Then, at a depth of 35 feet, the drillers appear to have hit bedrock. So, Thomas and Travis decide to get a core sample to see if, in fact, they really have hit bedrock, or if maybe they're looking at a similar situation to what they ran into when they tried drilling horizontally into the mesa. Travis then sees a large UFO in the sky, and both Caleb and Dragon appear to see it as well, with Dragon remarking that it appears to be circular shaped and it's moving quickly from west to east, disappearing north of the mesa. They then examine the core sample from the drilling rig, taken again at a depth of 35 to roughly 36 and a half feet. And when they open it up, it's nearly empty. In fact, it pretty much is empty. The drillers hit it really hard, and they hit this thing at roughly 150 times. And the sample casing was empty when they pulled it out. My understanding is that it should have been at the very least filled with something like gravel, yet it was empty. So the next morning, Eric and Jim Royston show the team the results of the data from the drone experiment done with Callista's sensor. And a very proud Travis Taylor watches the results. And once again, the GPS data doesn't match the drone's actual flight path as seen by multiple observers. And the data drops off again at that anomalous Kelsey's Spire zone. And Callista's sensor detects interference in the east field area, all of which confirms data drop offs in the same location, despite multiple kinds of sensors being deployed by multiple companies, multiple individuals. So again, John, what repeatable results?
Yep.
So Eric then shows them the video footage of the flash, which is clearly circular in shape and very bright. And Travis calls it one of the most impressive phenomena he's ever captured on video at the ranch. And I don't know about you, John, but when I saw the images of the flash, it instantly reminded me of what they caught a couple seasons ago
Hmm.
with Orion.
Yep.
And again, pure speculation on my end, folks. But to me, it looks it appears to be a tremendous burst of energy of some kind. And I would just formulate in my own mind, if I could ever see what it looked like, the opening or the closing of a portal or a wormhole, that it would look perhaps something like this, that there would be some kind of an energy signature, a visible energy signature similar to this. So was it that? I don't know. That's just maybe it's the product of me watching too many Doctor Strange and Marvel Universe movies. But with all the other things that we've seen that seem to indicate that there might be the presence of what they call a Lorentzian traversable wormhole on Skinwalker Ranch, is it really that far of a reach to think that maybe this flash and the one that occurred previously that they observed in the constellation of Orion, in regards to relative position in the nighttime sky, is it that much of a stretch to think that it couldn't be something like that? So, John, what are your
Oh,
thoughts?
I agree. It reminded me of exactly the same thing. And the interesting thing about that to me is what Travis brought up when they saw it. I think it was season 3, if I remember right. They kind of blur together, but I think it was 3. But he was like, that spot isn't moving. It's moving with the stars. That's sidereal motion. That's
Sidereal
something we
motion,
do not have
exactly.
the technology to do. If
Mhm.
it's actually above the earth and following the trajectory of the star, the movement of the stars, we can't do that just because of the way orbital mechanics work. We can't do that. And clearly something is doing that. And I couldn't tell, I guess it would depend on the distance, how far this flash was. If it still could have been something close by, whether it's, you know, supernatural or non-human, it still could have been something closer or further away. I couldn't really tell, but it is really weird. I mean, it sure looked a lot like that same phenomenon. And then to see a UFO that's moving right after that, it kind of does make you think, is that really a flash, a portal of something either leaving or arriving? And in this case, it was arriving, and then they saw it fly by, right? And
Right.
real fast, I have to touch you. You sort of touched on it, and I think it might have been my favorite part of the show. And if no one would guess this, you might understand. You'll understand this because you're a dad too. But when Travis tapped Callista on the arm and pointed at the drone and said, "You built that," we pointed at the stuff on the drone. That was that father's pride, that dad's pride. Oh my God,
Yeah.
that I thought that was amazing. I love that. That was
No,
so.
that's something that I
It did.
immediately identified with. I mean, the pride, both of us being fathers and having kids. I mean, there's no greater joy than seeing your kid really kind of come into their own
Mhm.
with something like what we saw Callista doing. So seeing Travis, you know, display that moment of pride in his daughter, that
Mhm.
just made me grin from ear to ear. It was so
Yep.
nice to
Same
see
here.
that.
Loved
So,
it.
so I think she's got a very bright future in
Oh,
her chosen field, and
yep.
as with Travis, I just tip my hat to her and gratitude and appreciation for her bringing her skills to the investigation at Skinwalker Ranch. That was really something to see. So I picked up on that too.
I knew you would. But other than
So
that, yeah, it goes back to what you just said. This stuff is starting to happen more often. They're learning different techniques that seems to stimulate this stuff.
right,
And if it's repeatable, then that allows them to actually study it. I think that was a problem with the NIDS days. The NIDS guys, the Bigelow team, they said we can't repeat anything. Like every
hmm
time, it seems like this thing is precognitive. It knows what we're going to do, and
hmm
it kind of messes with us and does something different that day, or doesn't do anything because most of the time it's not doing anything. But if they go to look, something weird happens one day and they're like, oh, let's set up an experiment to study that. Let's put some cameras over here to watch that. And then
right,
something happens on the other side of the ranch where they didn't have cameras, or something destroys their cameras and then does something weird. These guys,
exactly,
they're still running into some weirdness, but they're starting to, because they have better technology too,
right.
and maybe better scientists. I don't know. I mean, Nid's had some pretty killer scientists on board, but Travis and Eric are no slouches.
Not in the
I think they
slightest, and I
they 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 know what they're doing.
yeah.
Constraints to their budget, they know what they're doing. So,
Well, and the thing that people want to keep in mind is that when it comes to Bob Bigelow not being, for want of a better word, cooperative and not releasing the data of his investigation, we need to remember that it was his. It was his property. And granted, the government was involved while he was there. So there is an aspect that the information that was gleaned from all of his research that was done while NIDS and other investigators were there. Um, it's not if he decides, and if the government decides that it's not something the public has access to, there's not really a whole lot we can do about it.
Yep. Exactly.
And my understanding is, a lot of it does stem from Bob Bigelow himself not wanting to release the data. And as difficult as that is for some people to accept, that's just unfortunately the way it is, because it was his property. It was his baby, if you will. So if he wants to hold on to all that information, he's well within his rights to do so. And does that suck? Yeah, but again, that's the importance of shifting the narrative to not focus so much on what happened during the Bigelow era and what happened during the Sherman and the Myers era. Let's take full advantage of what is happening in the here and now with the team that we have there right now, where there is a level and degree of transparency we have never seen in the realm of not just Skinwalker Ranch, but the unexplained in general. And you're always going to hear me say this, folks, but if you're a Skinwalker Ranch insider, you can take even greater advantage of the opportunity to get even more transparency, get additional insights and behind the scenes information on the episodes that are aired on the History Channel. Because there's a lot of things that people that are just casual viewers that are not insiders don't have access to. And a lot of the questions that people have and a lot of the dismissals that arise because people don't have the full picture, as it were, that us insiders have access to, it would make you appreciate more what is going on at the ranch and the team that is out there working on the ranch and the degree of transparency that they are offering. When there's something that they can't tell us, they just simply tell us. They do have NDAs that they are legally bound to with the History Channel and with Prometheus. And so when they say stay tuned, or if they say we can't discuss that just yet, they're not doing that to be, deflective. They're doing it because they cannot discuss those things. They cannot disclose those things until such time that that information has aired already in an episode, or until such time that whatever restriction they have in their agreement with the History Channel and or Prometheus Entertainment has expired. So, but again, it's like you were saying, John, the pace of this investigation is picking up, and it's so nice to see. And that's why I get so discouraged when I see people, not just insiders, but anybody that says, "Oh, that Skinwalker Ranch show, that's they're just stringing you along so they can get more ratings, and they're just trying to milk it as long as they can." And John, as insiders that pay close attention to what happens on the episodes and that stay involved in the insider community and are there every time the team does a Q&A for the insiders, or whenever Caleb or Eric jumps on and talks about in greater detail some of the things that happened in the most recent episode to give us more clarification. It's difficult because we have that insight that those people don't, and it's hard for me not to sometimes let my New Yorker side come out swinging when people say, "Oh, this show is all just a bunch of nonsense and designed to pick up ratings, and Fugel's just doing this as a money grab," and it's like,
Which is, to be fair, that's what I said
right. Well, we've talked about
back in
that,
the
right?
day. Before I really watched it and got to know anybody, I kind of thought the same thing, so I get
Yeah,
it.
yeah. But again, to your point on that, John, what happened when you actually truly began watching the show and really paying attention? You started to see, hey, there really is something here. They're actually not just trying to sensationalize everything. They are truly following the data, and that's part of what draws me in and part of why I'm so invested in this Skinwalker Ranch nut house, if you will, is that it elevates that discourse, as Eric likes to say, and it has the potential that if they're able to continue to find answers and figuring out more pieces of this puzzle, the ramifications of what it can do for our perception of the world around us, our place in the universe, our perception of reality, may very well change because of the research being done out here. And it is, and that's the thing, is that people, a lot of people get so upset at the seemingly snail's pace of the way that this investigation is going. And I get that. I get the fact that people want to be entertained, right? But it's not an episode of Law and Order. It's not something where, in your typical episode of Law and Order, you have the commission of the crime, right? The crime takes place. Then they gather evidence, and then they make an arrest, and then they have the interrogation, and then they have, the trial, okay? And everything is resolved usually within a 42-minute episode, right? Real world does not work like that.
Yep.
Anybody that's seen the pace of legislation, molasses in January and then some. And so it is with a scientific process. It's a very deliberate process that has to be, you have to be able to verify or falsify the hypotheses that you formulate. And the way that you do that is, again, as we demonstrated in this episode, John, repeatable results, right? So these things take time. This is not um, this is the long game, as I like to call it. This is not something that's going to resolve itself over the space of a 42-minute television episode or even a season of, your typical 12 to 14 episodes, 16 episode season. This is something that since season one has been building and building and building and building. And if you think that it's not going anywhere, then again, you're not paying attention. And
Mhm.
that's unfortunate because this investigation is still not just active, but it is truly picking up pace and it is taking us into territory that I'm literally, John, I have been on the edge of my seat for at least half of the episodes this season. More so than any other season. I mean, I'm just literally on the edge of my seat going, did I? No, I did that really. Wow. Just like Travis has told us at Phenomicon a number of times, the things that happen will just simply shatter your view of reality. And
Mhm.
I can't even imagine what it's like for the actual team sitting on the information that they already know.
Right.
Imagine how hard it is for them. And it shows you what kind of integrity and moral character that each of them have, that they don't violate that.
Mhm.
They
They
don't
tried
violate
very
that
hard.
agreement,
Yeah, it's obvious they tried really hard not
right?
to.
I
Even
mean,
though you can tell they want to.
they
They're
want to,
dying to tell us, but they won't.
but they won't and they don't. And hats off to them for sticking to doing the right thing in that regard because they made a promise, they took an oath, and they're keeping it. And that's again, that should tell you everything you need to know about the character of the people that work on this amazing team at Skinwalker Ranch.
Yep.
Literally from Brandon Fugel on down. It's
Yep.
you know,
The-
they're awesome. And I'm just grateful to be a spectator along for the ride.
in a way, and maybe this kind of dovetails into one of the other topics, but it seems like the pace of the investigation there and some of the things we're learning might sort of dovetail into the greater disclosure discussion. Like there's all these things happening that kind of seem, they have their own timelines, but they do kind of seem to be converging a little bit, which is interesting.
I
Yeah.
completely
I don't know if
agree.
somebody planned that or not, but
Well,
it's
it makes you wonder
intriguing.
sometimes, doesn't it?
It does make me wonder.
But Brandon Fugel said something in an interview not too long ago. I forget with who it was with. It may have, I think it actually may have been in the Beyond one of the Beyond the Gates episodes this season. But um, where he says that he believes that disclosure will happen at a faster pace coming through the private sector than it ever will through Congress.
Mm,
And I think he's right. I absolutely think he's right because, as demonstrated by what is happening with his team via the Secret of Skinwalker Ranch docuseries. I think we're going to get farther along in figuring out what some of this is because of private sector endeavors like what he's doing with Skinwalker Ranch versus waiting for whoever the occupant happens to be at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue and coming clean and telling the American public whether we're truly alone on this planet or in the universe. I just think that quote unquote disclosure is going to come from the private sector and from whistleblowers a lot faster than it would ever come via legislation or our own government.
Yep, I agree.
So, but excellent way to dovetail, as you said, John, into our next topic. So that covers our recap and analysis of season 5, episode 5, The Flash of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. So now we're going to just briefly discuss our next topic, which is this last week on the 21st of May, Lue Elizondo, who of course was the former director of AATIP, has we've known for a long time that Lue has been working on a book. And for the first time, we now have a name for that book, as well as when we can expect that book to hit the shelves. And just to read a little bit from the official, the tweet from Lue's official Twitter or X account, he said, the name of the book is going to be called Imminent, Inside the Pentagon's Hunt for UFOs, and it will be released in August of 2024. And Lue says, Imminent is my call to action. The stakes could not be higher. This is an accurate portrayal of events as they happened. This book underwent a 9-month U.S. government security review and had a senior member of AATIP review the manuscript to ensure everything is exact and authentic. This is more than my story, it is our story, and I wrote it for you, the public, so that there is no question as to what we are dealing with and what the future might bring. After reading it, I think it will be clear why this topic is so incredibly important. And wow, what quite a bit to unpack in that tweet, right?
Yeah.
So we now have a name for the book. It's going to be called Imminent, Inside the Pentagon's Hunt for UFOs. And we know Lue's background. Lue comes from a intelligence background, and he served in the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, which was a successor to AAWSAP, the Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Application Program, which was a program created by former Senator Harry Reid with the help of Senators Daniel Inouye of Hawaii and Ted Stevens of Alaska. And AAWSAP, if you remember, John, was the program that allocated money for research at Skinwalker Ranch, while Bob Bigelow was the owner of the property. And then that morphed into AATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, where Lue Elizondo was involved in that as the director. And then, of course, after AATIP, we had the UAPTF, the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, which Travis Taylor was one of the scientific officers of. And then, of course, now UAPTF is known as AARO, the All Domain, the what is that? The All
Oh,
Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. There we go.
I had to think about it for a second.
Right. So, gosh, so many acronyms to memorize. So, Lue has been saying that this book is like this one is going to be. It's going to, at least he's left me with the impression that this is going to provide us with some answers of some kind. What kind of answers? I don't know. And the thing that worries me about this book now, for the record, I do believe Lue Elizondo. Um, I believe that his reasons for coming forward, his reasons for resigning from his position at AATIP were altruistic and legitimate. I tend to believe most of what Lue has to say. The only thing that concerns me is that in taking into account all the things and the little nuggets that Lue has dropped us along the way since 2017, is that maybe I'm a little concerned he's perhaps painted himself into a corner to the extent that he's made a lot of people like myself think that this book, when it comes out, is going to be like, you know, bombshell going off, wherein it's going to provide some very specific examples, some very specific names, some very specific locations where things happened, or where, if these allegations of crash retrieval programs exist, where are they? Who are the people? Is it going to name names? That kind of thing. And I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not going to hold my breath, I guess is what I'm going to say. I really respect and like Lue Elizondo, but that's my only concern with this book. And John, I'll get your opinion on this, but that's what my only fear is on this, is that there's been so much hype built up around the release of this book and everything that Lue has to say, that I'm afraid it's going to be not really what it was cracked up to be. Um, I hope I'm wrong. I hope that this book actually serves as a catalyst for moving us into the next phase of what we would call disclosure. And I really do hope that that's what we get out of this. But I'm not sure if we're really going to get that kind of substantive um, content out of this book. What are your thoughts?
I agree completely. I mean, he seems, you know, he none of us know him, but he seems trustworthy. He comes across as someone with a great deal of experience, and I don't think anyone disputes any of his achievements and his experience, doing, counterintelligence and his that type of thing. I mean, as I understand it, he's basically an actual hero. Consider the things that he's done. This is like an actual hero. But when it comes to this topic, yeah, I'm kind of with you. I think it's been built up a lot. The book, I mean, and I'm always kind of skeptical anyway. I kind of only believe maybe if I don't know someone, literally everything they say kind of gets put into a little box that's like to be evaluated later, right?
Right.
Um, and then even if I know someone, maybe I only trust like 90% of what they tell me, because especially with this topic, it seems like there's a mix of motives. There's conflicting ideas about how different events went down, and it's just hard to say. I think we're going through waves of information, and like each book that comes out from various authors isn't the whole truth, maybe, but it's more of the truth. And then the next thing you hear is a little bit more of the truth. It's like I don't think it's going to come all at once. And another thing you reminded me of is this had to go through DOPSR. This had to go through security approvals. Uh,
Exactly.
and that guarantees that the person writing the book isn't releasing something that's still classified,
Right.
which makes me wonder if we have all of these programs and all of this other classified things going on that would have to still be classified. Is that not violating classification? Is this not a security violation by him mentioning them? So how does that stuff get approved? But I guess the way they get around that is probably if the government it's officially publicly saying we don't have any of this, none of this stuff exists. Well, then he can talk about it because they've said publicly, oh no, it doesn't exist. So he can talk about it. Maybe that's how they get around it. But that sort of thing makes me wonder, like what are we actually going to get in the book? And I share your fear that it might be built up too much and we might be in for a disappointment. But still, even if that's true, I think it's going to be some interesting information. there's going to be a lot of stuff in there that we just have never heard before, and that will shed a little bit more light on the picture. The picture will be a little bit more complete than it is now, regardless of if 90% is true, if 100% is true, if 70% is true, it's still going to advance
I
the
agree.
end goal, maybe. I don't know. I'm
Yeah,
still not sure how to think about it until I read it.
I think I think it'll move the needle forward. How much I think remains to be seen. But yeah, I mean, there's always a certain amount of, the truth that some people are going to say is subjective. Um, and that seems, somewhat contradictory. Truth shouldn't be subjective. Truth should be an absolute, right?
Exactly.
Um, but when it comes to this particular topic, that doesn't seem to be the case a lot because there's always multiple facets to almost every aspect of this topic, right?
Mhm.
And whereas you have, in the past, like let's take the Roswell report that came out in 95 and also in 97, where they basically said, okay, Roswell was a something called Project Mogul. Well, they go and they publish this great thing and say, well, yeah, there were some documents that were missing that we can't find that appear to have been destroyed. Why they were destroyed, we couldn't tell you. Is it possible that these destroyed documents contained, valuable information? We don't know. So they just went along with that line of, it was Project Mogul, this weather balloon top secret project. Well, here's the thing: is that there's trouble with the consistency of that because I've read reports that say, well, there's certain things that are claimed to be part of Project Mogul that actually didn't even exist until the 1950s. Well,
Mhm. Right.
Roswell was July of 1947. So if some aspects of Project Mogul weren't even on the books or even weren't even realized until the 1950s, you got an inaccuracy. You've got something there that doesn't match up with the key narrative of
Right.
Project Mogul, right? So you have parts of the government, people that are spokespeople for the government that have said, no, there's nothing to see here. We have no evidence of there ever having been any off-world craft, non-human intelligence. And chances are they're probably telling you the truth if they haven't been read into these special access programs, which we know these programs do exist, to the extent, and when I say these programs, that by that I mean special access programs exist. Am I saying special access programs that are crash retrievals or alien, non-human, uh, biologic? I'm not saying that that's absolutely categorically real. I'm just saying this concept of special access, or what are sometimes known as unacknowledged special access programs, do they exist? Yes, they do. So already there's a foundation that something like these could exist where the overwhelming majority of Congress, the overwhelming majority of people serving in the military and the three-letter agencies that have not been read into these special access programs would not know of their existence. And so when they answer inquiries by saying, we are not aware of anything, we've never seen anything, then plausible deniability. They're telling you the truth.
Yep.
But are they telling you the truth because they haven't been read into it? And I think that factors in a lot. So, getting back to Lou's book, how much of a glimpse into that world are we going to get?
Yep.
And my hope is that we get a greater understanding of how that world exists. Because, of course, the allegations are now that all of this stuff is in the realm of the private sector to protect it from Freedom of Information Act inquiries, right? Because, you know, private corporations and private companies are not subject to FOIA. So it's, all this stuff makes for really great drama, really great a really great story, but how much of it is actually going to pan out to be real? And how much of that is going to be contained in Lue's book remains to be seen. I do believe that Lue is a good person. I do believe that he is a hero that has served our country, but I think he's got an uphill battle, and that's my only concern is that he's painted himself into a corner by making people have perhaps expectations that he legally and otherwise uh, cannot oblige by releasing this book. So hopefully we will get some more breadcrumbs and maybe even some direct answers with some of these questions. But do I think it's going to be the proverbial smoking gun for disclosure? No, because it can't be. Because to do so would require more of a process like what we see unfolding with David Grush, where there is an actual legitimate inquiry being undertaken. And even those kind of things, like we were saying with the show, John, is that these things take time. There's a deliberate process to allow these things to play out. And so I think I'm excited for the book. I'm absolutely going to buy a copy. I'm hoping that Lue Elizondo comes to Phenomicon. That would be really cool.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to hold my breath on really truly, having jaw dropping revelations of some of the secrets spilled. I'd like to get that, but I don't think we're going to.
I kind of hope we at least get one thing I'd like to get from it is clarification of the whole OSAP, ATIP, timeline. Because some of the things he said publicly, I don't know, haven't quite matched up with other things we've heard publicly. So it's a little confusing, because we know OSAP existed, we know when it existed, and we know that in some of the documents related to OSAP that came out that were public referred to it as ATIP.
Mhm.
But the story there is that was the unclassified name that they referred to in unclassified or less classified environments that actually was referring to the OSAP program, which was classified, at the time. I guess that makes sense. But then the story is from Lue that then transitioned to another group that truly was called ATIP, that he was the director of. And I think things get a little more confusing there. There's just some of that is a little confusing. So I hope it clarifies some timelines and the nomenclature of these different teams. Like, did they really start up a new ATIP and just take the name that they had used
Mhm.
for the unclassified name of OSAP and call the new team that, or what? It's a little confusing to me. So that type of thing, I'd love to get that type of thing from the book too, because to be honest, a lot of that doesn't make sense to me yet. I've never been able to put that timeline down in a way that matches up with everything we've read, like with John, I just speak Greenwald,
Greenwald, yeah.
Greenwald, the FOIA responses he's gotten about ATIP and with Lue and things we've read in, Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. There's a lot of different information. It's not totally conflicting, but there's a little bit of
Yeah.
conflicting information. I would like to see that.
It would be good to get some clarity on that for sure. I completely agree.
Because a lot of people, that's what they'll say. They'll use that to discredit Lue or whoever else.
Right.
They'll
And a
say,
lot
hey,
of people have, yes.
exactly. There's you said this, but that's not what the evidence supports. So yeah,
Yeah.
I would like to see that.
Well, I'm excited for August to get here so I can get my mitts on that book, and I guarantee I'll probably read through it in the space of a day.
Yeah. Yeah. You and a lot of people.
Just like I did for the Skinwalkers of the Pentagon. As soon as that came in, man, I just canceled everything for the day, canceled all my studio work, and just read it. And then after I finished reading it, I handed it to my dad, and my dad, he same thing. He read through the whole thing in the space of a day. So it was,
Yep.
yeah, right on. Alrighty, well, that covers what we're going to talk about with Lou. So let's take our final topic here, John, and talk about a gentleman by the name of Colonel Karl Nell. And
Yep.
we got plenty to talk about with what this guy did. So just real briefly, folks, let me give you a little bit of Karl Nell's resume, and then John, I'll kind of let you lead the discussion on this. So Karl Nell is uh, was a colonel with the U.S. Army. He is currently retired. He was a former deputy chief of staff at the U.S. Africa Command. He worked in Army Space Command. He was a member of the UAPTF. That's worth noting. And he has a degree in electrical engineering as well as a master's degree in strategic studies and mechanical engineering. And he has worked for Bell Labs, Lockheed, and Northrop Grumman. So, John, kind of tell us what the big to do is about Karl Nell this past
Well,
week.
yeah, this was a bombshell to me. I mean,
Me too.
he spoke at the SALT conference, which is a finance and technology summit, essentially. And I think it's primarily focused on finance, investment, future trends,
Venture
things that can
capitalists.
affect
Yeah,
markets, those sorts of topics.
right.
But it's interesting that they bring someone like Karl Nell to talk about this
Yeah,
specific
and it happened on Wall Street, right?
at a
It was in New
finance
York. Yeah,
summit.
yeah.
But he came right out of the gate, like right after they read through his resume, and he talked about who he was. The moderator, the interviewer, went right into, so you think this stuff is real? Like, I can't remember how he phrased it. You might already have it there, but
I actually have it.
go ahead and read it because the exact phrasing is important.
So the question from the moderator, and this is right out of the gate. He says, "Do you believe that a higher form of non-human intelligence has visited this planet?" And here is Karl Nell's very direct answer. He says, and I quote, "Non-human intelligence exists. Non-human intelligence has been interacting with humanity. This interaction is not new and it's been ongoing. There are unelected people in the government that are aware of that."
Right?
Blink, blink.
Unequivocal. Yeah. Unambiguous, unequivocal. Yes,
No,
this is
no
real.
BS. Right to the
No,
point.
there's when I heard that, my jaw unhinged and stayed unhinged for a few minutes because
Yeah.
I'm not used to it, especially in that type of environment. He's talking to finance people. These are investors, people involved in finance and financing tech industries.
Hmm.
But this is Wall Street. He's
Right.
talking to Wall Street about this, and he drops that bomb on these investors.
Well, and it gets even better with the follow-up question, because the immediate follow-up question is, that is quite a bold statement. I'm wondering and I'm curious, how confident are you that that is true? And this answer says it all, folks. Carl Nell responds by saying, quote, "There's zero doubt," close quote. Again, jaw floor.
Yeah, it's hard to even know what to say about that. Because you look at, we're used to hearing those sorts of statements in the past from people that could be labeled as quacks and wackos and nut jobs and whatever, whatever slur you can think of. You
Raider
can't say that
fans.
about people like him.
Yeah,
You can't, you just can't.
you can.
You look at the guy's resume, you look at what he does and has done. He's not a wacko. He's not a quack. This is a very serious individual with some very serious experience. And a lot of people like to say, well, where's the evidence? Until we actually see some evidence, it's still all BS. It's just, why do we care until they produce some evidence? The difference here is with him and with David Grush and David Fravor and
Ryan
Ryan
Graves.
Graves. Yeah. Those sorts of people. These are people that with experience that were in a position to know at least what they claim to know. You know, they're in a position to know that. This isn't someone that heard something from someone else, who heard it from someone else, who heard it from their great grandfather's aunt's nephew, brother, friend, but roommate. It's kind
Right.
of like the Spaceballs thing, these are the people that either experience these things directly or they have direct knowledge of them. and they truly were in a position to know. They're highly trusted. All of them have, security clearances. These aren't just nut jobs. These are people that you, in any other situation, if they said something, you would take it to the bank. Just because it's about a topic that maybe you are like, oh, okay, I don't know about that.
Mm-hmm.
It carries some weight, and a lot of people refuse to acknowledge that, and it's irritating. There's a qualitative difference in these reports compared to some past reports, in past decades by, maybe some others that weren't as credible. These are credible people.
Absolutely, and he even talks about that, John. He calls them, I believe he referred to them as the first principles in his talk, and what he means by that is, there's um, he breaks it up into what he calls the first principles and the data, and he talks first about the data. He says that there are specifically, like you said, there are people that have access to very high level data and information. And he provides us with some examples of people that would fit that description. One of
Mhm.
whom is a gentleman by the name of Paul Hellyer, who was the former Canadian defense minister. Chris Mellon, of course, we all know who Chris Mellon is.
Mhm.
David Grush is another individual, Lue Elizondo. And so these are people that are in a position to know, that have the proper security clearances to know these things, that have all come forward and said that there really is some something substantive to all of these extraordinary claims of crash retrievals and non-human intelligence visiting or being here on this planet. And he also illustrates and gives the example of the Gang of Eight. Okay, two
Mhm.
prominent members of the Gang of Eight: Senator Charles Schumer from my home state of New York, very prominent Democrat, and Senator Marco Rubio from the state of Florida, a very prominent Republican. Politically and ideologically, these two could not be further apart, right?
Mhm.
And but yet both of them are on the Gang of Eight that were briefed and that were shown evidence that we, the American people, haven't even seen yet, that substantiate these claims of there being crash retrieval programs, a decades long cover up of misleading the American people, and the recovery of, like David Grush says, non human biologics,
Mhm.
creatures, beings that are not human, or at least that are not from here, we would assume.
Not from Utah.
Not from Utah,
Well,
maybe
maybe they are from Utah.
maybe from Denver. Okay, maybe one of the outliers like Arvada or
Could be.
Westminster. You
Yeah.
never know. I've been to those areas. I've met some of those people there. But no, seriously, these are people that have the credentials, that have the resume, that have the gravitas, if you will, that have come forward and have given their own testimony of things that they have either seen firsthand or things that they encountered while executing the duties that they were responsible for executing in the offices that they held.
Mhm.
And so, like you say, John, these are not just, some random person that saw a UFO fly over a cornfield somewhere in Iowa or Nebraska. These are people that work in the defense industry, that work in the intelligence community, that work in the military, that work, at the highest levels of government and military. They've worked in all the alphabet agencies within the United States, and they have seen what we would call proof or evidence that there really is something extraordinary and substantive to all of these extraordinary claims. And that's kind of what Karl Nell was talking about. And so when you have somebody like a Karl Nell that comes out and makes a very, very bold statement like he did, you have to take notice of it. Whether you agree with him or not, you have to you have to arrive at, I would say, one of two conclusions, John. Either this guy is a total disinformation agent that is there to take the piss out of the American people and the people of the planet, or he is speaking from a position of authority as someone that knows, someone that has seen different kinds of evidence that there really is something to these claims that even 7 years ago I would have thought was a bunch of hooey and nonsense. But yet
Mhm. Yep.
here we are. I was a skeptic, and I still am a skeptic to a large degree. But I've come to accept the fact, based off of the data that I've been able to read about and listening to the testimony of people, that I have no reason to not believe what their account of their experience has been. And I'm in a place now where I have embraced the possibility that there really, in fact, may be a non human intelligence that has visited or has always inhabited this earth right alongside humanity. Um,
Mhm.
and that's not something that scares me. It's something that actually gives me hope for the future. Maybe this is something that, if this disclosure comes out, maybe this is the one thing that really truly can unite humanity.
Mhm.
Where we see it right now playing out before us in Congress, John, where you have somebody like a Chuck Schumer, who is, about as left and liberal Democrat as you can get, and then you've got guys like Representative Tim Burchett or Senator Marco Rubio that are their exact opposite, but on the
Yep.
right, conservative side. And yet they all come together on this one topic because it is so much bigger than just an American issue.
Mhm.
It has implications for the entire human race,
Yep.
regardless of nationality, regardless of anything else that differentiates us and makes us different from one another. At the core and at the end of the day, we are all still members of the human race. Even
Mhm.
us Raiders fans, we're human.
Right.
Barely,
Right.
but
See,
yeah,
if you and I can be friends, the Democrats and Republicans in Congress can be friends, right?
absolutely, sir. Tip my hat to you on that one. And so this is a topic that I'm fully invested in, and I take great interest in, and I think we are going to be arriving at the day where more of the information is going to start to come out. And whether that comes out through statements like Karl Nell made and through the actions of people like David Grush, that I think are very brave, um, that are doing this with the goal of not making themselves rich or famous. Because anybody who's hoping to do that, I think they got a couple of screws loose, because this is not, if I was just content with my job and doing my day to day, this is the last topic I would find myself wanting to dive into,
Mhm.
because it is fraught with all kinds of, I don't even know what the proper term, without using profanity, let's put it that way.
Right.
So, but it's just, I think that when we see people like Carl Nell making statements like this, I don't think it's there to sensationalize. I don't think it's there to spread disinformation. I have to believe what he says, and I've got no reason not to. I've seen no reason not to. Nobody's been able to present a case to me to get me to say, you know what, yeah, David Grush he's full of it, or Carl Nell or Chris Mellon. Um, I haven't seen a credible case brought forth by anybody to tell me otherwise. And
Yep.
again, it just plays into the comment that I made earlier about what an exciting time this is to be alive and watch all of this play out. And I'm just grateful that I get to be here as a spectator to watch all of this unfold in front of us.
Mhm. I agree. And Grush and Carl Nell, as far as I could tell, are unimpeachable.
Agreed.
I, they're, some of the other characters in this field, I'm not entirely sure about. As based on what I know at the moment, I would say you can trust Carl Nell, you can trust David Grush, you know. And speaking of the guys that he mentioned, though, he also mentioned Haim Shed from
Right.
Israel, who's an Israeli
Israel's
general
Space
who ran
Force.
like
Yeah.
their space force. If
Yeah.
you really want to feel like Alice in Wonderland, go read the sorts of things he says is absolutely true. He confirms all of this and more.
Right.
It and it kind of touches what Paul Hellyer said, and I used to think Paul Hellyer was full of it. to be honest with you.
I wasn't sure what
I,
to make him
yeah,
at first.
I kind of thought, you know, he's a civilian who landed that job, and somebody put this in his head,
Oh,
and
and he came forward before the Pentagon released the videos and before the New York Times article, right? I mean,
right, yeah, he came out a
I
long time ago.
I remember hearing about Paul Hellyer back in like before 2010, if I'm
Yeah,
not
it was
mistaken.
years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you look at his claims, and you're like, I don't know, this is pretty full of it. And he does mention some things. Oh, what's it called? There was a story about aliens from a certain planet that I think ended up being nonsense. All I can remember is it starts with an S. Oh my Lord, for the life of me, I can't think of it. But anyway, Paul Hellyer brought this up.
Mhm.
It's I can only think of the movie. Remember the movie Serpico?
Oh yeah, Al Pacino.
The name of this planet reminds me of that. And now I can't think of the name of the planet. But anyway,
Yep.
as I understand it, that turned out to be nonsense. And since Paul Hellyer was saying that, people were dismissing everything else he said, but I don't know for sure that it was nonsense. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe the people saying it was nonsense were trying to cover up, say, oh crap, that got out. That wasn't supposed to get out. So they were saying it was nonsense. I don't know.
Yeah.
Who knows? But when someone like Karl Nell mentions Paul Hellyer, then I'm like, oh crud. Do I need to go listen again to what he said and reevaluate that? You know, and then you look at Jaime Shed and look at the stuff he's been saying, and you kind of start piecing it together. You know, maybe you don't believe everything that all of them say, but you look for the areas where they overlap. You know, where
Yeah,
they overlap might be where the greatest probability of their actual truth is, you know. I don't
the biggest disappointment for me has been Dr. Stephen Greer, because there was a time where I believed that he did so much to bring so many things to light back in the day, but it seems that he started to take a turn in a completely different direction along about the time that New York Times article came out. I mean, he released that video, that documentary Unacknowledged, which I think is a fantastic um, documentary. But then his allegations of, that the United States government is going to do this false flag operation, claiming that we're going to be invaded by aliens when it's really our own technology. I mean, that was just a bridge too far for me to jump with his claims. And do I? I mean, and there's some other things about Greer that kind of rub me the wrong way that I won't get into. But there's certainly no shortage of people that I think in the past they were on the right path, and for whatever reason they just deviated from that path. Whereas right now, like we've been saying, Grush and Karl Nell and Lue Elizondo, these are people that they're what they are offering carries a lot more weight. And I don't know. It's what makes it so difficult to sift through all that signal to noise ratio.
know.
Speaking as a putting on my audio engineer's cap here for a minute. I mean, there's so much noise out there, and being able to filter through that noise to find the real value of some of the things that are being offered out there is difficult to do. But at the same time, I go back to what we were saying just a short while ago about the direwolf situation at Skinwalker Ranch. I never I never said, okay, that's completely impossible. There's no way the direwolf thing that the Shermans talked about was ever possible. I just didn't have it, as one of the most likely things to maybe be a reality. And yet here we are, the data shows otherwise. So, if anything, it also shows me that even though I may not like the direction somebody like Dr. Greer, his current trajectory is on, I'm still not going to completely toss him on the scrap heap, because you just don't know. Some of the more outlandish, some of the more seemingly ridiculous stories out there may end up having more than a shred of truth.
Yep.
And that's what I always have to remind myself at the end of the day.
Yep. I agree.
Yep. Right on. Well, John, thank you so much for taking time out of your Saturday evening here on Memorial Day weekend to join me in this great conversation. Your input and your insight always so much fun, and it just wouldn't be right if we didn't talk about music at least for a moment. So, what are you listening to right now? Anything exciting
Oh gosh.
you've discovered lately?
You know what? Hang on. I did two different people sent me links about the same band today that I've never heard of before. And I was going to send it to you, but then I forgot because I was preparing for this. Electric Callboy.
Hmm.
You know who that is? I've never heard of it.
Electric Cowboy.
Callboy, Callboy.
No, that one's
Yeah,
new to
I'll
me.
send you the links that they sent. They're actually one of them is really weird, but the other one is them with another band. Um, what was I can't remember the name of the band. It was Baby Metal. It was
Baby
a
metal.
girl band called Baby Metal
Okay,
and Electric Callboy doing a collaboration. It was pretty good.
interesting.
Like I got to send this to Jim.
My curiosity has been piqued.
Yeah,
So,
so that was that.
all right,
Yeah. So
right
that's
on.
that's the new music of the day. I had never heard of that band, and then seriously, two completely unrelated people sent me two different videos about them today. So that must be fate. I was here to let you know about them, so you can
Right on.
experience.
Nice. Well, let's see, my latest discoveries. I've kind of been diving a little bit deeper into Chris Stapleton's catalog. Um, he has that song Tennessee Whiskey that that song never gets old for me. But I also have kind of been rediscovering the latest OMD album, Bauhaus Staircase.
Mhm.
I mean, I have a personal connection with OMD, and so I've been a lifelong fan of orchestral maneuvers in the dark. But this most recent album of theirs is just truly. I thought it was good when it released, but I've the last couple of days I've really been doing a deep dive into it, and it's just there's just something about when one of your heroes, when a band or an artist that you've been listening to for most of your life, that has been one of your biggest sources of inspiration, when they can still release brand new material that reminds you of why you fell in love with their music
Mhm.
all those years ago, and they can still do it at this age, really really has a profound impact, and that's what OMD have been doing for me with this latest release. There's a track on their album that my mom and dad both were big fans of. They released this particular track before the album did, so before both my mom and dad passed away. And as I listen to this song, I'm instantly reminded of my mom and dad. It's a beautiful song called "Don't Go," and just might be one of the most beautiful synth pop songs ever written. And I made the mistake of watching the music video for it.
Oh
I mean,
no.
I got all misty eyed and couldn't blaming on my allergies, you know.
Hmm.
But that's kind of what I've been getting into, and of course, my radio show is now back on the air. So I've got all these independent bands that are sending me music, and I've discovered some really great stuff. There's an artist by the name of Christopher Anton in Texas, who at one time was the lead singer of the American synth pop band Information Society, and so
Cool.
he's got a great new single that just came out. There's a great band from Canada called Breathe of My Leaves that are kind of like a erasure kind of type band that I actually got to do a remix for with my secret space program project that I do.
Wow.
Their music has been blowing my mind lately. There's a great band from Sweden called More that kind of have a classic Depeche Mode feel to them that I've really been into. So yeah, I just music is my thing. Oh, and I've been going down this rabbit hole of 1950s and 1960s lounge music. Oh my gosh.
Okay, I wouldn't have expected that.
Right. And I blame it on my son because my son has been, my son is like me. His music tastes are so eclectic. But, I mean, I've always been a fan of stuff like Sinatra and all the great crooners back in the 40s and 50s. But yeah, I'm like listening to this, classic ultra cheesy, borderline easy listening uh classic lounge music, like make me up a martini and just I don't know why. I can't stop listening to that stuff. So yeah. And then of course the next day I'll go and I'll be listening to Metallica's Black album or AC/DC's Back in Black, Queensryche, Empire. I mean,
You're like me. The taste, if anyone were to look at the stuff that I listen to, they wouldn't be able to figure out what I like because
exactly.
it's all over the place.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Same with me. But it took me a long while to get there. In fact, I remember there was a time I got to attend a seminar that the great Alan Parsons, the Alan
Mm.
Parsons Project,
Hmm.
producer of Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon album. He worked as an engineer on the Beatles' Abbey Road album, I think. So Alan Parsons is like one of the biggest icons if you're a music producer. So for me, he's always been one of my heroes. And he made a comment one time, and I'm totally paraphrasing it here, but he said, regardless of what kind of music you like to listen to, the money is still green. And of course, he's referring to, um, being a producer. If you're only going to produce the kind of music that you yourself like listening to, you're probably not going to make a lot of money. You have to be willing, if a polka band knocks on your studio door and says, "Hey, produce our album," if they got the money, guess what? You're going to produce that polka album.
Right.
It
Yep.
may not be what I want to listen to at the end of the day, but
Right.
and that was where it wasn't until I started producing music professionally and became a professional audio engineer that I really truly developed an appreciation for a wide range of music. Because when I'm listening to the stuff that enjoy listening to on my own, it's typically, the 1980s new wave synth pop, classic rock, old school hip hop, Run DMC, Beastie Boys, whatever. Um, but now that I've been doing this for so long, for most of my adult life, I mean, you look at my music collection, like you just said, John, people are probably not going to be able to figure out because I'll have on one of my playlists, I've got everything that you would expect, like, Depeche Mode, Erasure, OMD, Duran Duran, Tears for Fears. You're also going to see Def Leppard, Metallica, Motley Crue, AC/DC, but then you're going to see Mormon Tabernacle Choir or Enigma or,
Yep.
Frank Sinatra, Garth Brooks, George Strait. I mean, it's what it comes down to is the groove is universal and good music. If it moves you, then you shouldn't feel guilty about listening to it.
Yep.
And that's
I was
that's
just
how I
looking
feel.
through my like recent liked list. There's a Anders manga, the
Mhm.
Rosaries and Requiem song. Remember that?
Yes,
Then
yes, yes.
is
Oh my
that not a
gosh, I
great
love that.
song?
Love that. Yes.
Seriously, that's the best driving at night song. If you're just
Mhm,
driving at night through the city and you have that on,
mhm.
it's perfect. But
I
yeah,
got one for you. One of my
okay.
favorites, driving through the desert, listening to Robert Plant, lead singer of
Hmm?
Led Zeppelin. He did a solo album in the 80s called The Principle of Moments. There's a song on there called Big Log. Oh my gosh, love that
I
song.
think I've heard that.
One of the best driving songs ever. Check it out.
I will check it out. Yeah, I don't think you would have heard of any of the other bands. Well, the Killers, the Killers.
Oh yeah, love the
Yeah.
Killers.
But then Stromae, the Joy Formidable, Moika, the Japanese House, Neon Capital, Kat Von D, um,
I know Cat Von D. Yep.
Aaron LeCount,
Mhm.
uh, Boa, Blonde Shell, Paramore. You probably know
Oh yeah,
Paramore.
no Paramore. Yep.
Steve Lacy, David James Band, Opio. You probably know
Mm,
Opio.
wow.
A Swedish band named Kent. Yeah,
Oh
I mean,
gosh, I
just
know I
all
know
over the
Kent really
place.
well. Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
know I know Kent's music. Yeah.
do you? Yeah.
Oh yeah, Yeah.
I like them a lot. I've got a ton of their songs on here. But yeah,
I went
just
through a Scandinavian pop phase about 7 or 8 years ago, and I got into bands like Kent and
I'm still
uh,
in that phase.
another band from Norway. Oh my gosh, the dumbest name, Donkey Boy, all one word. That's their name. But holy cow, some of the best pop music that I've heard in a long time. So
Mhm.
yeah, there's some good Scandinavian pop out
Pop up
there.
there. They got some good
Yeah.
songwriters. Max Martin,
Yep.
Swedish,
That's right. He
ever
the weekend
songwriter. Right there.
all the weekend's great hits. Max Martin co-wrote and produced. And God, I think he worked with Backstreet Boys too. I think Max
Everybody.
Martin. So
Dude's
yeah,
a gazillionaire by now.
I'm
Can you
sure he
imagine
is.
having his
Yeah.
publishing catalog?
Oh, you know what? Our viewership probably just went, "Eep." But
Right? It dropped down to 5.
there's no way that John and I would be able to get away with doing an episode without talking about music for at least a little while. So
Right.
for those of you that stuck around, thank you, and hopefully you'll listen to some new stuff. Go listen to the stuff that John talked about. That the Requiem. Tell him again, John.
Uh, Anders Manga, and their song is Rosaries and Requiems.
Rosaries and Requiems. Yes.
Great song.
Also, folks, check out Big Log by Robert Plant, and check out Don't Go by OMD, because it's those are my music recommendations. Awesome stuff. But don't watch the music video for OMD's Don't Go, or else you're likely to get misty eyed, especially if you've had parents that recently
Oh, crap.
passed.
Yeah.
But
Watch that.
yeah, get me right there. So, but anyway, folks, thank you for watching today's episode. Thank you for being with me again, John. Always a pleasure to have you join us here on the Soul of the Unexplained. And
Likewise.
want to wish you a very happy and safe Memorial Day. Want to tip my hat to all the brave men and women that serve our country and all the various branches of the military. And of course, to all those that gave the ultimate sacrifice so that I can enjoy my freedoms here in the great nation of the United States of America. So, folks, have a wonderful weekend. And Roger and I will be back next week to do a much shorter recap of episode 6. Actually, there's no episode this next week, is there?
No.
That's right. So remember, folks, there will the next episode of the Secret of Skinwalker Ranch is going to be on June 4th, I believe, is the day, and that will be episode number 6. So until then, folks, if you like what you saw and what you heard, please hit that subscribe button right down there to be notified every time Roger and I release new material. And other than that, we will see you next time, folks. John, any closing remarks? Any closing
Oh, just
thoughts?
thank you so much for inviting me on. It was a blast as always.
Right on, and a pleasure and a blast to have you as well. We got to get Dennis back on here with
I
us
know.
sometime, right?
Great.
Talk about
Absolutely.
some guitars. Talk about some Paul Reed Smith and Gretsch and Fender and everything else under the sun. Right on. Okay, folks, we will see you next time. See ya.